One morning, a woman I'd never seen before walked up my driveway like she owned the place, because according to her, she did. She didn't knock, she didn't say hello, she just started pointing at my windows and talking about load-bearing walls and community synergy. When I finally got her attention, she told me that the HOA president, her sister, had officially transferred my lake cabin to her. Not sold, gifted, just signed it over like a used Honda Civic. She'd already planned to turn my home into a headquarters for the community. Meetings, bulletin boards, potlucks, the works, all happening in my living room. No one asked me. No one warned me. And what started as pure confusion turned into something much, much darker when I realized why they wanted this specific spot. Trust me, nothing about this was accidental. If you've ever dealt with a neighbor who thought the world revolved around them, drop a comment below, because you are not going to believe where this story goes. I was halfway through fixing a loose hinge on my screen door when the white SUV skidded to a halt in my gravel driveway. It was a Saturday, the kind of morning that makes you glad to be alive. Sun creeping over the water, golden shadows stretching through the pines, the smell of sawdust and coffee in the air. I'd bought this place 6 months ago. It was a fixer-upper on the edge of the water, a little rough around the edges, but it was mine. I worked at the county records office during the week, staring at screens and deeds, so spending my weekends hammering nails and smelling fresh air was my therapy. And then, the car door slammed. A woman stepped out. She was wearing designer sunglasses that probably cost more than my first car, and an outfit that screamed, "I don't do manual labor." She held a manila folder in the air like it was a royal decree. I didn't know her name yet, but I could tell by the way she walked, heels crunching aggressively on my gravel, that my peaceful morning was dead. "Finally," she said, not looking at me, but looking past me at the cabin. "It's smaller than Barbara said, but we can knock out that south wall for the conference area." I stood there, hammer in hand, blinking. "Excuse me." She pulled down her sunglasses and looked at me like I was the gardener. "Oh, you're still here. Barbara said you might be lingering. I'm Emily, Barbara's sister, the new owner." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. "The new owner?" I repeated, trying to find the logic in a situation that had none. "Lady, I think you're confused. I own this house. I have the mortgage to prove it." Emily laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was the kind of laugh you give a child who thinks they can fly. "Oh, sweetie, no. Barbara. She's the HOA president. You know, she processed the transfer yesterday. This cabin has been designated as the new community headquarters. It's an eminent domain thing, or something like that. Community resource reallocation. It's all in here." She waved the folder. "Now, if you could just move your truck? My contractor is coming at 10 to measure for the new laminate flooring." I honestly looked around for a hidden camera. I thought, this is a prank show. It has to be. But the trees were silent, and Emily was already walking up my porch steps, reaching into her purse for a set of keys. Keys. She had keys. Or she thought she did. "Do not take another step," I said. My voice was low, but it stopped her. "I don't know who Barbara is, and I don't care what she told you. If you try to open that door, I'm calling the sheriff." She stopped, looking genuinely confused, like I was speaking a foreign language. "But it's been gifted. To me. For the community." That's when Barbara Henderson herself appeared. She must have parked down the road and walked up, making a dramatic entrance. And let me tell you, Barbara was the final boss of Karen's. She had the haircut, that sharp, blonde bob that looked like it could cut glass, and a red power blazer that looked ridiculous in the woods. She was carrying a clipboard like a shield. "Is there a problem here?" Barbara asked, her voice tight and clipped. "Yeah," I said, stepping off the porch to block them. "Your sister thinks she owns my house." Barbara sighed, a long, suffering exhale. "It's not your house anymore, is it? We held an emergency board vote on Thursday. Under the 1968 charter, the association reserves the right to reclaim properties that are deemed critical to community infrastructure. We need a headquarters. Your cabin is central. Therefore, it has been reallocated. We'll be sending you a check for the tax-assessed value, eventually." She handed me a piece of paper from her clipboard. It had a gold seal on it. It looked official. It had "Notice of Reallocation" typed in bold letters. Now, here's where they made their mistake. They saw a guy in a flannel shirt covered in sawdust and assumed I was just some clueless woodsman. They didn't know that from Monday to Friday, I am a senior title specialist at the county clerk's office. I don't just read property law, I live it. I eat deeds for breakfast. I took the paper. I scanned it. I saw the citations they were using, obscure bylaws from 50 years ago that had been overridden by state law in the 90s. I saw the transfer stamp, which was literally just a rubber stamp you can buy at Staples. This is fraud, I said calmly. You can't just vote to take someone's house, Barbara. That's not how property rights work in America. This isn't a communist regime. It's a lake house. Barbara stepped closer, invading my personal space. She smelled like expensive perfume and old desperation. She lowered her voice, so only I could hear. Listen to me. You're new here. You don't know how things work. We need this location. And when the HOA decides it needs something, it gets it. If you fight us, we will fine you into bankruptcy. We will find violations you didn't even know existed. Just take the check when it comes and go. Then she turned to Emily and whispered something that made my blood run cold. She said, once we control this spot, the shortcut access is viable. 20 years of waiting, Emily. We're finally cashing out. Cashing out. They weren't building a community center. They were planning something else. I kicked them off my property. I told them if they didn't leave in 30 seconds, I was charging them with criminal trespass. They huffed. They threatened. Emily cried about her laminate flooring, but they left. But as I watched their SUV disappear down the dirt road, I knew this wasn't over. Barbara had the look of a woman who had gambled everything on this move. I didn't fish that weekend. I didn't fix the door. I went to work. Not my physical job, but my investigative one. I drove to the county office on Sunday. I have a key card. I went into the archives, the deep archives that aren't digitized yet, and I started pulling everything related to our subdivision. I looked at the HOA charter. Sure enough, there was a vague clause about community assets, but it was meant for things like park benches and broken swing sets, not private residences. But then I started looking at the maps. I pulled the county's future development overlays. It took me 4 hours of cross-referencing zoning applications and civil engineering proposals, but then I found it, and my jaw hit the floor. There was a proposal filed quietly 3 months ago for a highway connector, a massive off-ramp project designed to relieve traffic from the interstate. The proposed route cut right through the edge of our neighborhood. And the choke point? The one piece of land that the Highway Commission absolutely needed to access the main road? My driveway. If the state needed my land, they would pay me for an easement. A nice chunk of change, maybe 50 grand. But if the HOA owned the land, if they converted my cabin into a community center and controlled the access point, they wouldn't just get an easement fee. They could negotiate a commercial access contract. I ran the numbers based on comparable commercial deals in the county. We were talking about development rights worth upwards of $2 million. Barbara wasn't trying to build a clubhouse. She was trying to steal a $2 million lottery ticket. And Emily? Emily was just the patsy whose name would be on the deed when the state cut the check. 20 years of waiting, she had said. Barbara had probably known about this highway expansion plan for decades, waiting for the right moment, waiting for a newcomer like me who she thought she could bully. I sat back in my chair in the silent office, the blue light of the monitor reflecting in my eyes. I wasn't just going to stop her. I was going to bury her. The harassment started on Tuesday. I got home from work to find a stop work order taped to my door, a fake one, printed on HOA letterhead. It claimed my cabin was structurally unsound and slated for demolition. Then came the fines. $500 for unauthorized parking in my own driveway. $200 for unsightly debris, a bag of potting soil on my porch. $1,000 for verbal harassment of board members. Wednesday night, they held the emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't invited, but I went anyway. It was in the basement of the local library. Barbara had set it up like a war room. She had charts. She had graphs. She had a projector showing a rendering of the Henderson Community Hub, which was just my house painted beige with a vending machine on the porch. The room was packed with confused neighbors. Barbara was up front, spinning a tale about how I was an absentee landlord, a squatter, a blight on the neighborhood. We have to take action, she was saying, her laser pointer circling my living room. This property is essential for our future. Imagine, a place where we can all gather. I stood up from the back of the room. Imagine, I said loudly, a place where Barbara cashes a $2 million check from the Highway Commission. The room went dead silent. Barbara dropped her laser pointer. I walked to the front, holding a stack of files thick enough to stop a bullet. She's lying to you, I told the neighbors. She doesn't want a clubhouse. She wants the highway easement money. I work for the county. I pulled the records. I tossed copies of the highway proposal onto the tables. People started grabbing them, whispering. Barbara's face turned a color I've never seen on a human being, sort of a violent, bruised purple. "This is out of order," she shrieked. "Security. Remove him." There was no security. Just old Mr. Peterson from next door, who stood up and said, "Let the boy speak, Barbara. He's got the county seal on these papers." I laid it all out. The scheme. The fraud. The fact that she was trying to trick the community into seizing private property so she could embezzle the development funds. I explained that if they went along with this, every single homeowner could be sued for conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. "You could lose your homes," I said. "Not because of me. Because of her." The mood in the room shifted instantly. It went from confused to hostile. People were looking at Barbara not as their leader, but as a liability. But Barbara wasn't done. She was cornered, and cornered animals bite. "He's lying," she screamed, slamming her hands on the table. "He forged those documents. The transfer is already complete. Emily owns that house." She looked at Emily, who was sitting in the front row, looking pale. "Tell them, Emily. Tell them it's ours." Emily stood up. She looked at Barbara. Then she looked at me. Then she looked at the angry mob of neighbors holding copies of the highway plan. Emily stammered. I didn't know about the money, Barb. You said it was for the kids." "Shut up," Barbara hissed. "Stick to the script." That was the nail in the coffin. I left the meeting feeling good. I thought I had won. But the next day, things got scary. I was at work when my phone alerted me. Motion detected at the front door. I pulled up the camera feed. It was a locksmith. And standing behind him was Barbara. She wasn't giving up. She was breaking in. I called the sheriff immediately, but I was 20 minutes away. I watched on my phone, helpless, as the locksmith drilled my deadbolt. Barbara pushed past him, marching into my living room like she was conquering a country. She started pointing at my furniture. That goes. Paint this wall white." She was insane. She had snapped. By the time I skidded into the driveway, the sheriff was already there. Deputy Miller, a good guy I knew from the county office. He was standing on the porch, talking to Barbara. I ran up. She broke in. I have it on video. "He's the intruder," Barbara shouted, pointing at me. "I am the HOA president. This is community property. I have the paperwork." She waved her fake transfer document at the deputy. Deputy Miller looked at it. Then he looked at me. "Jack, is this true? Did you sign this?" "No," I said. "She forged it. Look at the date. I was in a staff meeting at the county office at that time. I can prove it with 3 witnesses and a time card." Miller looked at Barbara. "Ma'am, did you sign this for him?" "I signed it as his proxy," she yelled. "It's in the bylaws. Implied consent." "Implied consent isn't a thing for deed transfers, ma'am," Miller said, his voice dropping an octave. "That's forgery, and breaking and entering." "Arrest him," she shrieked, lunging at me. Miller stepped in between us. He grabbed Barbara's wrist. "Ma'am, calm down." She swung at him. She actually took a swing at a uniformed officer with her clipboard. It didn't end well for her. Within seconds, Barbara Henderson, the queen of the HOA, was face down on my porch, cuffed, reading her rights while screaming that she knew the mayor. Emily was sitting on my porch steps, crying. She looked up at me. "I really wanted to put a bulletin board there," she whispered, pointing to a wall. I picked out the cork. "Go home, Emily," I said gently. The legal fallout was spectacular. I didn't just sue Barbara. I dismantled her life. My lawyer, a shark named Rebecca who hated HOAs on principle, filed a civil suit for fraud, trespassing, harassment, and emotional distress. We didn't just go after Barbara. We went after the HOA's insurance policy. When the insurance company saw the evidence, the forged deeds, the video of her breaking in, the police report for assaulting an officer, they settled so fast it made my head spin. They paid out a massive settlement to me to avoid a trial. But the real justice came from the criminal courts. Barbara was charged with forgery, grand larceny, attempted, and assault. She pleaded down to avoid jail time, but the terms were brutal: 5 years probation, massive restitution, and a permanent restraining order. She was barred from ever serving on a board of directors for any organization ever again. She had to sell her house to pay the legal fees. I watched the moving trucks from my porch, sipping coffee. And the best part? 6 months later, the state approved the highway connector. They came to me, the legitimate owner. We need an easement, the state engineer told me, standing in my driveway. We're willing to offer fair market value. I know the value, I said, smiling. I pulled the comps. I negotiated a payout of $225,000 for a strip of land I wasn't even using. It wasn't the $2 million Barbara had fantasized about. She had vastly overestimated the commercial zoning potential. But it was enough to pay off my mortgage completely and renovate the cabin exactly how I wanted. I built a deck. I put in a new dock. And I painted the front door a bright, electric blue. The neighborhood changed after that. The fear was gone. The new HOA board was formed by people who actually lived there, normal people who just wanted the snow plowed and the trash picked up. They voted to dissolve the Architectural Review Committee entirely. I still see Emily sometimes. She works at the bakery in town now. She seems happier. She waves when I come in. We don't talk about the headquarters. But sometimes, when I'm sitting on my new deck, listening to the quiet lap of the lake water, I think about Barbara. I think about the look on her face when she realized her master plan was built on sand. She thought she could use the rules to steal a life. She thought paperwork was a weapon. She forgot that paper burns. So, here's the lesson. Folks, know your rights. Read the fine print. And never, ever let someone with a clipboard tell you where you can live. Because sometimes, the only thing standing between a tyrant and your home is your willingness to stand in the driveway and say no. And if they don't listen, well, make sure your security cameras are rolling. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If this story got your blood boiling, hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you have your own HOA nightmare story, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. Until next time, stay free.